That was the hardest thing to deal with during his own commitment. Not the insanity. That came naturally. The hardest thing to deal with was the righteousness of the sane. Hi there, this is my commentary on Chapter 25 of Lila, An Inquiry into Morals. This wasn't any kind of drugs, he thought. This was real trouble. He recognized the style of what she was saying, the salad of words. He had been accused of it himself once. They meant something to her. But she was leaving things out and skipping and hopping from place to place. So in this chapter, the shoe is on the other foot. Phaedrus is the sane one now, and he's encountering sort of, a ghost of his former self. He long ago learned that the best way to avoid trouble was to act sane, and he's gotten so used to being static that the super dynamic Lila really throws him for a loop. He's kind of kicking himself for not recognizing the signs, and now he's stuck with her because a person like this in this situation obviously has nowhere to go, and he has inadvertently ended up being her caretaker. His initial thoughts and actions from the vantage point of his cultivated sanity shame us a bit, because everything that goes through his head is more than likely what goes through the head of any of us when we see, for example, a filthy, homeless person on the street talking to themselves. Of course she's unimportant. Of course she's a waste of time. She's causing an interruption of other more important purposes in life. No one admits it, but that's really the reason the insane get locked up. They're disgusting people you want to get rid of but can't. It's not just that they have absurd ideas that no one else believes. What makes them insane is that they have these ideas and are a nuisance to somebody else. And of course, since she is such a nuisance, a burden, he would like to get rid of her. And the most literal version that goes through his head, the easiest way to get rid of a burden is to dump it. And he's headed out to sea, so who would miss this crazy lady? So the formulator of a metaphysics of morals is facing a very moral dilemma himself. We can judge Phaedrus if we like at this thought of getting rid of her, but Phaedrus, again, is all of us. This is the truth of our social selves. We admire those above us who seem to have their act together. And these poor deluded souls, they're the lowest rung of society. They don't do us any good. On the contrary, they sap us. If we're lucky enough, we don't end up in a position like Phaedrus, But still, they annoy us with their rants and their smells and their just general chaotic quality. And there's a biological level repulsion that we simply can't help. So in metaphysics of quality terms, Phaedrus's social biological morality says, do it, throw her overboard, get rid of her. Like, let's just say the early social biological morality of early civilizations, they would rid themselves of members that dragged down the community. But of course, after a little, reflection, his social intellectual morality kicks in and overtakes this biological element. And his biology is filled with nausea at this thought. The social intellectual morality logically demonstrates he was once in this same position, and of course reminds him this is a human being and an equal person. The stance of seeing self in others and the ensuing logic of it is a rather late development in human morality, and it is guided by the intellectual principle of equality. So let's talk about Lila's delusions. What do they mean? She's in a delusional state in which she's communing with archetypal images of her life. Lucky, her dog, probably the only source of unconditional love, is found alive again. The last time we saw her when she was wandering the streets of New York, and she's convinced he's alive, and the abusive dead husband is surfaced when she was alone on the street. Now that she's found the boat and safe, these archetypes don't exactly haunt her as much as present themselves in a more positive light. Coincident, I guess, with the fact that she's in a safe situation and the situation is positive and is going to evoke positive emotions. So the archetypes and the delusions will be more positive at this point. And there is also a redemptive quality to her delusions now. They are freeing her from what must be social level torment of her whole life. And the very pinnacle of this social level torment is that she killed her own child. Yes, it wasn't her fault, but this is yet another social mark against her. And she's already running on a major deficit in this regard. So in this delusion that she's having now, the social problems are solved. She has her baby back. She has her childhood companion who loves her. And she has the kind benefactor, who she calls the boatman, who can ferry them all to paradise, the island, so they can be a happy family in a happy place. And that is at the top of the hierarchy of the social level, if you think about it. He looked at her very closely. She returned his gaze, and suddenly he saw it again, the thing he had seen in the bar in Kingston, the light, and he felt inappropriately relaxed by it. My gut instinct is that this light indicates dynamic potential, the wide open space of dynamic quality. In the bar, it invited the pair to guilt-free lovemaking, and now it is inviting true human connection once again, but in a more, let's say, domestic sense. The light of dynamism, it's an invitation to experience unfettered quality. And in the first case, it was biological, and now it's unfettered social quality. And indeed, Phaedrus intuits this as a message to reclaim some of that dynamism that he's lost in this very static state he's been in for some time. So later, Phaedrus reflects on the situation, is reminded of his own delusions in which he inhabited this space of pure dynamic quality, holding on to static reality with a tether, with a very, let's just say, ever more fraying tether. So how would you explain this to other people in this movie, let's say? It would be impossible unless the viewers were to experience it firsthand, and that experience is an overwhelming freedom of all patterns. They become pure consciousness floating in the universe, and their only hope of holding on to that world that they've known up to now is that screen that they're watching. But with someone of the insight of Phaedrus in his most creative, most dynamic, let's say insane state, he realizes it's always just been a screen, and this is the way to convey the feeling. That in fact, the smelly sock of the illusory world of subjects and objects has just been turned inside out, and the bug that has been inside the sock can experience the dynamism of fresh air. He remembered how he kept to himself the feeling of exhilaration, of old mysteries being solved, of new mysteries being explored. He remembered how it seemed to him he hadn't entered a cataleptic trance. He had fallen out of one. He was free of a static pattern of life he thought was unchangeable. So we were talking before about how useless crazy people are, but are they really? Remember, Phaedrus was crazy, and yet what did he achieve? Maybe we're repulsed biologically, but have you ever passed a ranting schizophrenic and suddenly heard a well-articulated statement or even some wisdom amidst that incoherence? Intellectually, unbalanced people are responsible for some of the best art, literature, science, and philosophy, so there is indeed a fine line between genius and insanity. So what to do with Lila? Throw her overboard, or realize that he once had that halo himself, and from possessing that halo came one of the greatest books of the 20th century, one that Robert Redford wants to make into a movie. So I hope that made sense, and I'll see you next time.